My name is Luis Rodriguez. I'm one of the career advisors at the Career Center within the Student Union. So today's conversation will be discussing, AI and how to prepare for interviews as we, move into more of this digital space in terms of how can we prepare, how can we use AI as a friend, not as a foe, right? And so Ryan as well will shed some light in terms of, what employers might be looking at in terms of, marketing yourself and how to use certain technologies that might be incorporated to, in a sense, streamline hiring process, right? So I hope that today's session is informative and have some questions towards the end so we can have Ryan or myself address those, okay? So without further ado, give me 1 second. Yeah, so go ahead, Ryan, if you want to take it away.
Sure. Yeah, if you want to jump on to the first slide. So, hey, everyone, thanks for having me. As you can see here, I come from HireVue. For those of you that aren't familiar, we are an HR tech company that back in 2002 started with purely video interviews. Our founder, Mark Newman, had an idea. He was at school. He's from just outside of Salt Lake City originally. And he was at a school in Utah, and he really wanted to be an investment banker. And he wanted to interview with Goldman Sachs. And he was met time and time again because of his resume, that he wasn't from an Ivy League school, things like that, right? He wasn't getting through the competition. So credit to him, he had an idea of, well, there's got to be a better way to potentially represent myself to potential employers. And he had an idea, like, what if we did a video interview? What if it didn't necessitate me flying to New York to go meet with investment banks, something like that? And so fast forward to 2024, and we have just shy of 1,400 global customers. Everything's founded in the video interview. Some of you may have taken the HireVue video interview, where we have the on-demand, it's the asynchronous video interview. We have the live video interview, which is not, it is an interview platform. There are questions. It's a structured interview platform, but it's not dissimilar to doing a Zoom or Teams interview. And then layered within that, there's scheduling technologies, there's various pieces of automation. And then a big piece of it is the assessments products that we have between our virtual job tryouts, realistic job previews, and then competency-based video assessments that we have. And I've been at HireVue for about 5 years. I've sat in the recruiting space, been in the financial consulting space as well. But what I'm excited to do is really want to shed light on a few things, at least initially in the conversation. But the first one, and Julio, if you want to go to the next slide there, is I want to talk about what our clients are doing, because that's who I'm working with, right? I am working with employers, most of which are in the Fortune 100, and we've got 63 of the Fortune 100 companies as clients. Why are they employing tools like AI and HireVue in their interviewing processes and recruiting processes? The number one theme that we hear is automation. The goal there is to say, how do I speed up my process, no matter what job or candidate population there is, with AI to actually employ more human touch points and a better candidate experience. So instead of spending all your time trying to schedule candidates, for example, you're actually spending time learning who the candidate is, learning more about them, how they may fit. So what this slide is, and it's a little bit busy, but it's where many of our clients and where we as a company are focused on, where we know the resume is it's a big focus for most of you, right? Coming out of school, I know it was all about the resume for me, right? And going and using like the Dartmouth Tuck guidelines and all that kind of stuff to figure out what's the best resume to use, right? And building that, and that's what I cared about. And now, yes, it's an important piece. It's an important piece for record, and you can help represent yourself, and we'll talk about that. But we also want to highlight skills and potential, right? Especially in the early careers in the campus space. Like, we're not always going to, what project that you did and how does it relate to your work at XYZ company? Like that interview question could be kind of antiquated, right? It's more about the communication skills that you have. Maybe there's language skills, things like that, and potential. And that's where the employers are really focused on is skills and potential for their companies. How do they identify those to ensure that we're not just hiring someone based on what they did in the past, but also what they're going to potentially do for this company in the future. Um, and then second to that, they're all kind of equal, but this big second point is how does it all play in the candidate experience, right? So that's a big piece that I'm focused on, making these equitable processes, inclusive processes, and processes that really help the candidate get not just enjoy it, but get a really strong understanding of who the employer is, and that transparency behind it. So that's another reason that they're using HireVue and that they're using things like the AI-based interviews. And let's see, anything else that I missed in here? No, I think that's really it. And of course, I do want to say as we go to the next, let's go to the next slide there, Julio. As we go through this, I'm happy to answer any questions that you have, and talk about some of the prep, and we'll do that on the next slide as well, on some Julio slides. But this is just some data. Sorry, let's go back to the one. I just wanted to highlight some of this. This is some interesting data that our marketing team has grabbed from working with market research, and our customers as well, and prospective customers. But we're seeing things. This is why we're focused on potential, why we're focused less on what did you do in the past, or what does your resume say, versus what can you do, what skills do you have, how are you representing yourself, right? And really getting to you as a human, and more so than a black and white piece of paper. And that is because jobs are going to be changing, right? We're going to hit on ChatGPT, right, in this conversation today. I talked about it with 2 clients today. So it's a hot topic, but it's a hot button issue. And then we also know, and I know this from my, just time in recruiting, trying to get some things changed, but and then I'm happy to take a quick break for any questions, things like that, before we jump into Julio stuff. But yeah, I wanted to highlight preparing for an assessment interview for all of you, because HireVue is obviously not the only assessment provider out there, right? There are some older ones out there like the SHL, where you're going to have, and I never had to do one of these, thankfully, but like the personality tests where it's just hundreds of multiple choice questions, right? What HireVue provides is a video interview, so you can imagine a very similar experience as to any video interview where you're asked a question, there's a competency base behind it. It's a competency laden question. It's been built by IO psychologists. We are we're compliant with the federal government in terms of like the OOFC guidelines, and equal opportunity guidelines, everything like that, that's set by the federal government with the competencies that we use, to ensure that we've got a scientifically backed, legally defensible process for our clients, but also to ensure that the candidates that are taking these are really confident in what we're doing, right, and the approach that we're taking. To lift under the hood a little bit about the assessments that we build, if you come across a HireVue AI-based video interview, we have actually gone to each company and done about an 8-week rigorous study with that employer to identify what's the right competencies for that specific job in that specific employer. So it could be, now the jobs could be wide ranging, right? It could be early careers, it could be sales, it could be software engineering. We have nursing ones. We've got a lot of different jobs out there, but we help build that specifically using data. And I think we have about 25,000 data points per interview, across over 33 million interviews now that we've used to compile this data to ensure some accuracy. And we keep refreshing that with our clients every single year. And that's to ensure scientific rigor and accuracy in the assessment interviews. And the other thing that I want to make abundantly clear, as well, if you come across a HireVue assessment interview, the way it's being graded and what we're grading is two different things. But the what we're grading is what you're saying as a candidate, the way that you're answering it. So the only thing that we are actually recording in an interview that's downloaded as part of the assessment score are the words that you say that are transcribed with natural language processing. And then the transcript is then helped put into the score. And the score is based on the weighting of the competencies that a specific company may pick. So there's not really, because of that, there's no facial action units, no, where we at HireVue know someone's first name, last name, and email, and that doesn't go into the score. But there is no race, gender, none of that is going into the AI assessment interview. None of it has gone into an AI assessment interview since we sunset all of that, those facial action unit pieces that were looking at like eye contact, things like that. That was all sunset back in, I think the last one that was finally sunset was in 2020. So it's been some time since we've had one of those. So I want to make that clear that none of that goes into a score. And the way the score is we identify the competencies, what those competencies are. There's questions that help uncover those competencies that you as a candidate would answer. And then the weighting of the competencies, like, is working with information more important than working with the team? Communication is usually scored throughout. Things like that, that weighting, working memory could be part of the games, things like that. Those are things that help derive a score for a given job at a given company. So there's no real rubric. There's not really a way to necessarily ace it. Just like any interview ever, if it's the right fit for you and you've done the research and the preparation and stuff necessary for the interview, and you do well, then you're typically going to do well. The way that a scoring and ranking could happen or it does happen in these interviews for the company's sake is it's almost similar to like an SAT or standardized test, right? Where you're actually ranked against your peers on that position. So again, it's not necessarily a rubric like, oh, I got a 75 because there's a tried and true method to get a 75 or an 88 or whatever. If you scored a 98% on a given HireVue position, a position that a company's using, we're using a HireVue assessment, that 98% is basically ranking you against your peers. So you did you're at the 98th percentile compared to your peers. But when you're preparing for any video interview, any asynchronous digital interview, whether it's HireVue, whether it's not, whether it has an assessment, an AI in it, whether it doesn't, like it says here, research the company, look at their culture, their values, their products, and see how, again, your skills align. Talk about your skills, talk about how you could potentially help an organization, right? And the things that you've brought. Less, I would even say less so about to use a crude example, oh, I did this project and I could see this being, it's about finance and therefore I can work on your financial firm. It's like, no, like, what skills did you bring to the table, right? What was it, were you chosen to be the presenter of this because you've got really strong communication skills, things like that. Really understand that. And then do some research online to understand roles and responsibilities. Go on LinkedIn, look at what some people who are, incumbently in that position do, or look at their backgrounds, look at where they've come from. Maybe you can find out a little bit more about the position and maybe how your skills could align. The job description, like I said before, doesn't always tell everything. So do as much research as you can on the website. Maybe there's some testimonials or some quotes from incumbent employees that you can find out. Go on Glassdoor, see what's going on there. Glassdoor can be typically a negative review site, but you can probably learn some things there. So, and then like it says here, be prepared to share personal professional experiences, all the lessons you've learned. And there's going to be different types of interview questions, as it says here. So at least on the HireVue side, it's going to be multiple choice. It's going to be video. It could have essay. So just have some ideas of what you want to answer. And this is where and I know we'll talk about this pretty shortly here, but these are the kind of things that I would say, this is where ChatGPT can come to your advantage, right? Using something like that to prepare for an interview is great. Research the company using ChatGPT. maybe get some ideas to, some inspiration for some responses. Like, oh, if I was to talk about XYZ type of question, use ChatGPT if you're kind of stuck, right? Oh, how would I start this? What would I say? And use some inspiration. But definitely take whatever you're getting from that and do not and make it your own. Because companies right now, and the conversations I'm having right now with these Fortune 100 companies, for example, they're very aware and they're looking for usage of ChatGPT and other forms of AI, but they don't know what to do with it. It's too immature at this standpoint. So typically it goes into a negative sphere where it's like they know that they want to use it on their own end as a company to help automate something. There's a way to use it, but they don't know how yet. And that's the same thing in the interview process when we're talking about something like ChatGPT. They are looking for answers that don't feel like someone answered, you as the individual answered it, right? They have a keen eye for those things right now, and that really becomes apparent in second interviews and in-person interviews, right? They are paying attention to things like that, pretty much any employer I'm talking to. So there's really good strengths to it, but definitely you want to make your responses and your preparation your own for these interviews, whether it's an asynchronous assessment or not. There's also, for coding questions, just to call out outside of different type of assessment, but for coding questions, there are so many cheating mitigation things and code similarity scores out there that if you were to take a coding response, copy it, have ChatGPT solve for it, companies figure it out pretty quickly, especially if they're using a tool like HireVue, where we will see, 100 people respond to a certain coding question, and then all of a sudden 8 people have very similar scores, as smart as ChatGPT can be. That can get flagged, and people are looking for that, especially in those types of hiring environments. But there's a lot on this slide. This stuff is also on our website. We also have a candidate help center on our website. So if you do come across a HireVue interview in a company using that, feel free to jump on there and look for our candidate help center if you have any other questions, best ways to connect, things like that. But again, it would leave you with like, treat every interview, whether it's got an assessment or not, exactly the same. Do all the research on the company, do your preparation, and make it your own. Because there's no rubric to beat in these type of interviews. Like I said, you're not gonna, if you're gonna ace the interview, it's because you've done the preparation and it's the right fit for you, and the right fit for the employer, just like it always has been with an interview. But that's a bunch of what I had. Julio, I don't know if any questions popped up in the chat, anything like that. I'm happy to answer anything, or if anyone wants to ask a question right now. Otherwise, I guess we can wait for questions too at the end.
Yeah, no, thank you, Ryan. I think we can wait towards the end, just so because of the little technical hiccup we had. But thank you. Yeah, so as Ryan, with his insight in regards to the field of recruitment and how to prepare for that, right? It's important to understand that when you're applying to an internship, a job, a fellowship, anything where you're gonna have to communicate your skills, your story, it's important to prepare, right? Like Ryan mentioned, it's like, how do you prepare for these events, right? It's not like every day we wake up and we're like, I'm gonna practice interview. We don't, right? We react to an interview, right? It's not something we do every day. So but as while you're in college, there's services involved that you can access, whether it be with us at the Career Center. But as we mentioned, today's topic is AI and machine learning. So what's at your disposal while you're here, right? We have things such as Big Interview and VMock, right? And ChatGPT, right? ChatGPT is more of a general a source, right? But within USC, Big Interview and VMock are resources that you want to use and tap into, right? In the chat, can y'all type in if you've used Big Interview or VMock? Because I know VMock is more for resumes, but they actually added a new feature where you can now use, how to create your 2-minute elevator pitch, or or how to do mock interviews in there, right? So I'll showcase that in a little bit of the other slides. Great, I have been used. So Rachel, I have used neither. Okay, so maybe you want to explore those when you have some time, Rachel. Haven't used Adam. Yeah. So if you haven't used them, I would highly suggest to get on Connect SC, go on the resource tab and find these resources on there so you can start utilizing these, right? They're you can record yourself basically, right? And it'll give you feedback. It'll gauge you on sort of what Ryan touched about, right? It gauges you on your content. It might do a little bit too much sometimes, but what I always tell students is when you're doing these self recordings of yourself, see what you're saying, right? Are you making constructive storylines, right? Are you touching on the skills? Are you being specific and then giving examples? Because sometimes we might be just talking in general terms, right? So an interviewer doesn't really get much if you're just saying, yeah, I did data analysis with some spreadsheets and I, compiled them, whatnot, right? So you want to really be able to convey like, yeah, as a data analyst, I was able to clean up data using whatever, a software program that uses that, right? So you really want to break it down for somebody to understand what is it that you know how to do, right? How have you done it in the past, right? And these models help you with that.
I could just jump in there quickly
Yeah,
too. Yeah.
yeah, and feel free to do that anytime, right?
What the employers are looking for, right, is whether it's asynchronous or live interview, they're looking for efficiency, right? They're looking for someone to efficiently and effectively communicate skills and responses, right? So definitely use it to practice. You can also, when if you're invited to take a HireVue interview, you can practice on the HireVue site as well. There is an opportunity. Absolutely do it. I did when I was applying for HireVue because I've never used it before. So yeah, use the tools at your disposal, and you want to, really focus on those efficient, effective answers. And like I said, focus on skills, focus on potential. That can really help you. Less so than, yes, we're all talking about what we've done in our past and how it may relate, but try to conduct your story in a future focused message, right? Versus focusing on things you did in the past, because that's where organizations are really starting to try to go. Some really, really large ones are completely revamping what they're looking at to be focused on skills and potential and less so what the resume says.
Yeah. So again, so glad to have Ryan here for those insights, right? In terms of what what is it that you can focus on as you move forward, right? So big interview. This is sort of like the gist of like what you would see, right? When you're on there. I'm gonna see if you guys can see my screen. Can y'all see my screen right now? Can you see it, Ryan? The big interview one? So yeah, so once you sign up, right? If you sign up, for those that haven't, I would suggest to do it. Once you're in there, this would be like your dashboard. Here you'll have like level 1, level 2 as you progress and learn how to, interview and move up the answering those questions, you'll be able to see your progress, right? There's things such as helping with your resume, if you want to challenge yourself, right? There's curriculum here that you can use, right? But I know sometimes we're on a time crunch, so we want to just practice, right? Here in the interview tab, we have interview curriculum, question libraries, right? And the question libraries, pretty cool because you have anything that goes from a general question general questions by industry, competencies, if you're trying to apply for a school, a government position, or if you're a veteran, right? So this is really cool that it's organized for you to easily access some of these questions that you might, have curiosity about. What I really like as well is that when you click a certain section, it even breaks it down further by if you're trying to change careers, right? Entry level internships, managerial roles, right? On and on and on. What it does then, let's say you're applying for an internship. You click on the internship, right? It gives you about 10 questions that are relevant to, based on levels as well. Like if you're, it's not like it just throws you into the deep end. So why are you interested in interning with us, right? A simple question. Like sometimes it's a little bit hard to ask, like, well, why do I even want this position, right? What makes me interested in, right? So knowing how you can answer that, and if you're prepared, you'll be able to gauge it, right? It gives you strategies, right? As like how you can answer it, right? So you're not just going to be answering it on your own if you kind of want that brainstorming aspect. And then once you're kind of read over it, you're like, okay, let's practice with this person named Stacy, right? Who's the person who essentially is asking you the question, right? Right now, I can't access the webcam because I'm using Zoom, right? But once you record yourself, you'll be able to see yourself, give yourself feedback. And if I'm correct, Big Interview does provide some analytics. But as Ryan mentioned, I wouldn't focus so much when you're practicing on like, certain things like gestures, if you're looking away too much, right? Because I feel like sometimes that takes away from the main aspect of what is it that you're saying, right? We can always work on like hand gestures, eye contact, stuff like that, right? So I wouldn't say get fixated on that. We want to really assure that we are practicing and getting out your story in a concise, organized manner, right? Because that is what they're looking for, right?
Yeah, just to add to that, especially in the asynchronous video interview space, like a recorded video interview response, which could feel very similar to this. Employers are not looking for the eye contact pieces, what, where you're looking. It's not to say they haven't, right? Like, I know that there's companies out there focused on hiring sales, and they're like, oh, I want a 1 minute response and this and that, right? And they're looking for something that's kind of stereotypical, but more and more employers are focused on diversity, DE&I, right? They're looking for that, and they're looking for like I said before, what is a candidate saying? How are they saying? What's their communication skills, things like that. They're looking at skills and not focused on the biases, and especially they're using these tools to get away from the biases and unconscious biases. Someone have like various things. It may not just be a gesture that you're doing. If you're doing this the entire time you're talking, a human gets distracted by that. An assessment doesn't, things like that. They're using these tools to get around these things. They're not focused on someone blinking a lot or looking around as they're responding. They're focused on the content of the answer. And that's why they're using a lot of the HR technology tools that are out there today to get rid of those biases or unconscious biases. They're not looking at, they're using these tools to get away from gender, race, all of those kind of things. And even frankly, I know to give you a quick one, when I was a recruiter, and I was phone screening people, they're getting away from things like that, because when I was phone screening people, I was a human phone screening another human. So I had good days and bad days, right? I had Friday afternoons that I didn't want to do anything, and Monday mornings when I was kind of like ready to go, things like that. Though I could have asked the same exact questions, but they're being asked in a very different way, in a much different experience based on my mood as a human. And frankly, if someone is a USC grad, and then they see on the resume, or even if as someone's responding, there's a USC flag in the background, everything may change in the terms of that interview, even if the same questions are being asked. They're using these tools to get around from outward biases, unconscious biases, to try to make the best hiring decisions on the best potential for candidates. And ask every single person the same question in the same exact way for fairness as well. And that's the experience you should be receiving with a lot of these tools that are out there. And I think that, like, just looking at Big Interview, you're going to see some similar experiences, but that's the goal. So focus again on what you're saying, answering the question. Don't worry too much about the video itself in many of these scenarios.
Yeah, awesome. So then we move on to Big BMOC, right? As I've asked in the chat, right? If you haven't used this is a good resource too to use. That helps with it. We've used it primarily for resume building and helping students, get a better sense of how to construct a resume. But as of yesterday, we gained access to their mock interview features, so it's pretty cool. Typically, if you sign up, this is if you're able to see my screen, you can upload your resume, right? It gives you a score, whatnot, right? So it's just a quick plugin to use it for your resume. But since we're talking about interviewing, when we talk about this little section here, you'll be able to start it's pretty easy to use. You start recording, and as you see the person with the picture, it will give you analytics, right? As we talked about. So it's a little bit more in depth. And again, we want to focus on the content, and it's very good. The good thing about this resource is that it does, like, as you speak, it spews out what you're saying in the moment. So you can really see what you're saying. If you're using too many filler words, like stuttering, right? And you can address that in the moment, right? So that's really cool. So, but this is the 2-minute elevator pitch. When it comes to the mock interview, which is a little bit different, it'll give you questions. The cool thing that I liked about this was that you can actually, if you're into like data analysis, right? You can actually look up, or not coming up, but let's just do accounting for this, just to save time. It'll create 12 to 14-minute questions, right? 7 questions, 6 questions, right? And you can choose which ones you want to answer, right, in practice. Basic, difficulty, you could do basic, intermediate, advanced, 120 seconds, right? So you can choose what you want to use to prepare for a particular opportunity that might be coming up, right? Start the interview, and then it'll ask you to, make sure that your technology is set up, that you're in a nice room, right? So it'll do all that checking of technology just to make sure that it's getting the right analytics, right? So I will give you the opportunity to maybe explore this in your own time now that you know that it's free. So I know there's just questions on here that if these services are free. As a USC student, BMOC and Big Interview are free, right? So I would highly suggest knowing how to use these so you can better prepare in case you can't meet with an advisor, you're on a time crunch, maybe you're a night owl, you want to practice at 2 a.m., right? That's the beauty of this, that you can practice at any given time, right? But yeah, so BMOC. ChatGPT, right? So what is ChatGPT? Sometimes we get this question I know some students don't know what ChatGPT is, right? They're like, oh, I heard it's like, it kind of helps you with your resume, right? But it's a language model. What would you call it, Ryan? Like a processor, or what would be the right word?
It's like I don't know, open AI platform. It's something that knows a lot of things. I mean, what it does is just scrubs the entire internet, right? You ask a question, or I did it earlier today. I had it write me an email, and then I made edits to it. But I was kind of, what it did was it scanned any examples out there of like the best emails in that type of context and scenario that I gave it. The more specificity you provide the tool, the better it's going to be. This has nothing to do with recruiting, but I find it extremely helpful when I'm making packing lists, to like, go away for a weekend or a vacation. So it just kind of does anything, right? It just scans the internet and provides some of the, it aggregates some of the best information that's out there, at least the most viewed or most popular information that's out there, to spit some information back to you. But like we were saying before, it's a super helpful tool if you're doing, high level research, right? You don't need to know every little thing about a company. You don't need to go listen to, as someone interviewing for a company, you don't need to listen to their shareholder calls, right? Like you don't need to do that necessarily. But what you can do is, learn a lot more about that. And like it says here, right? Guidance on behavioral structures, generate interview questions, resume help. I like to use it more as a thought provoker than anything else. When you're thinking like, okay, how am I going to prep for XYZ interview, right? Like it's a great tool to do that, and really enhance some of the research that you're doing.
Yeah, so I like to think about it like a Google on steroids, right? As when you do a Google search, you typically try to find the best link that gives you the answer that you're looking for, right? ChatGPT sort of compiles that, and it saves you a lot of time. So that's what's really cool about it. So when you're looking for ways to prepare for an interview, essentially, if you learn how to, give it a prompt, or ask it to provide something, it'll be within seconds. I took the time to, give you kind of a cheat sheet of what you can use, right? As a beginner's prompt, if you haven't used ChatGPT, I know that some people have used it on the chat, but if you're looking for specific, prompts that you can use when trying to prepare for an interview, right? These are the ones that you can use, right? In the where you insert the company, job titles, right? That would be essentially, you plugging in what the information that's relevant to you, right? So if you feel free to screenshot this, right? Use it for whatever, as a starter guide, right? And so researching the company, right? Generating sample interview questions. Tell me about yourself. I put that one because I feel like tell me about yourself is one of those questions that trips up a lot of people. What do I say about myself? How do I even construct that question, right? And so it really depends, right, on everybody's individual background or skill set, right? But you still want to be able to concise an answer that is, relevant to a position, right? Or it says why you're interested in this position as well, right? But ChatGPT can help you with this, right? It's a brainstorming tool. It's not for it to replace your identity. It's to at least help you, guide you, and like, okay, I don't have that answer right now, but how can I start constructing that, right? So yeah, so I actually will show how I've used. So for this example, right, I took that prompt, right? And I am applying for a junior analyst role at Deloitte. Here is the job description. Could you generate comprehensive list of common interview questions specific to this role? based on my background and the provided this job description, right? So what you need to do though is make sure that you actually have the job description at hand, that you know which one it is, right? Copy the qualifications, what the role is about, right? You plug it in, and ChatGPT will then spit out like about 20 questions that you can practice, right? Based on looking for general background, skills and data analysis, tech skills, right? And this is just an example, right? This could be applied to any role. And the idea is for you to see if you're able to answer these questions, to practice them, right? If you can't, that means that there's an opportunity for you to develop that skill to answer that question, right? You can ask it to help you narrate how to answer that question, right? But at the same time, I wouldn't want you to become dependent on it and not be able to answer for yourself, right? As Ryan hinted at, they're looking for particular set of skills, right? How are you constructing your thoughts? How are you saying it, right? If you're sounding robotic, right? That might mean that you're reading off of a script. It might not be essentially prepared, right? So use this as a way to gauge yourself, right? If you're able to answer these questions, right? And then you can use these questions again to record yourself, right? You could use your phone if you want to, if you don't want to use VMock or Big Interview, right? So there's various ways to really gauge yourself and criticize where your areas of opportunities are and how you can address them, whether it would be with us at the Career Center, at events, right? Or, just asking for feedback from somebody else who maybe you interview with, right? Did you want to interject or some, Ryan?
No. No, just if you and don't. I guess the only thing I would add here with the ChatGPT piece is it's a very helpful tool, but like, don't let that be the only tool, right? I'm going to drop this link in our chat here for people to check out as a good example. Not every company has this example, so big disclaimer there. But if you just do a little bit of digging in a careers page, right, or in a company website. So like I went to the careers page of PwC, who's been a HireVue customer for a long time, and I click PW, and instead of going to like what jobs they have, because of course that's what's right in front of your face, like early careers, this type of job types, right, and that's where I naturally would go to, right, if I'm looking for a job there. There's a whole focus on the PwC professional. They have also step-by-step things of their interview processes, things like that. And if you just spend a little bit more time going through companies' websites, you'll find a lot of this, and they invest a lot of money in what their ATSs have, applicant tracking systems, and what their careers pages have. And there are, so let me drop this link in here, but just to give you examples about actually switching over to this, they have the questions that you might even be looking for, right? So for this example, but like they have 3 questions about what their leadership focus is, their business acumen focus is, technical and digital trends, inclusivity. Like they have questions on their website in their careers page. I don't know them off the top of my head, but I'd be very surprised if you were to be introduced to the company in the first interview, some of these weren't covered, or a version of these questions. So there's questions in here, there's different pieces of the relationship, but there's a lot that you can grab from each company's website beyond the job descriptions that are on there. And that can tell you a lot more and give you a lot better insight too, which then, of course, you could say, how would I answer that? And then you can go to a ChatGPT, but you can find a lot on a company's career page just by digging a little bit further.
Yeah, definitely. So moving forward, right? So then this goes into the basics of interviewing, right? So we've kind of gone through the tech heavy aspects of where we're at now and the how it looks to get an opportunity, right? Or how to prepare for it, right? It was before, it was maybe a little bit different in terms of preparing for interviews, right? But now with technology and the way it's evolving, you can definitely, it's to our edge. We have an advantage to a degree, right? Because we can find that information a little bit more faster than before, right? But as Ryan hinted, is right, preparing to do your research, right? Not only just preparing based on the job description, but looking at the company itself, right? Reading their values, anything that was relevant in the news that might be of interest to you, right? That you can make a talking point out of it, right? So these things can really add to that. Okay, this individual knows why they want to work for us. They're in touch with what's recent in our company, right? So all of these things make it paint a narrative of who you are and how prepared you are coming into these interviews or opportunities, right? These conversations, as I like to call them, right? So preparing, right, is reviewing the position, right? Researching the company, connecting with alumni, right? We have a Trojan network here that is pretty expansive. You want to talk to those people that might have worked there, right? So you can pick their brain. I got my job here at USC by talking to one of the advisors here, maybe asking a little bit of questions there, right? Like, what's the position, what's going on, right? So I was like, okay, cool. Like, I'm interested in applying to this, right? So that was really beneficial in my experience, right? And from that research that you gain, right, you could essentially prepare questions at the end of the interview, because asking questions sometimes they're like, well, what do I ask, right? Do I ask the common ones like, when will I hear back? What makes me a good candidate, right? Those are basic questions. But if you can ask questions that really resonate towards the end of the conversation, it can make you stand out, right? Because, oh, this individual asked a different question that maybe we haven't heard, and it was really interesting that they asked that, right? So that's all based on the information that you get. So keep that in mind. Types of interviews, right? So types of interviews can range from, one-on-one, traditional ones, whether it be, in person, now through Zoom, right? Telephone screens. Telephone screens are starting to phase out, if I'm correct. They're not as common. Usually a phone screen now could even be like a 15-minute Zoom call. Or they might do a higher view. I'm not sure, Ryan, if that's true, right? But those phone screens are starting to go away, right? Little by little. Sequential, first, second, third. That means there's like various rounds involved, right? Series. Sometimes I was part of a series of interviewing, which was, I think, 4 hours. It was really fun though. Actually, had a good time with that one, meeting the different departments, individuals involved. Panel. Sometimes you might meet with different people from different areas of the company. I think I've done at least 4 of these, and the panel ones were pretty intimidating at first, because I was like, oh my God, what are they gonna ask me, right? But again, no matter the setting of the interview, as long as you know what your story is, what your skill set are, and confident in what you're gonna say, right, you'll be able to overcome some of these, settings that you might not be familiar with, right? Because sometimes if you go into an interview and you really don't know what you're gonna say, that makes it even worse, right? I always say it's okay to be nervous. It's not okay to be nervous and not know what to say, because then that really shows that you were unprepared for this event, right? You don't want to waste their time either, right? It's a mutual thing. So yeah, that's kind of the idea, the basics of interviewing, right? Other things to consider, right? Just making sure you know the time, the location, asking clarification of where the interview is taking place, because sometimes that happens. They don't really, maybe somebody, then they're not communicating where the event, where the interview might be at, right? Maybe it's on Zoom in a particular building, right? So it's okay to ask those questions, right? So just to better prepare. Types of interview questions that you can, expect, right? Straightforward ones, such as like, tell me about your background, right? That's kind of hinting at what your skill set are, what you're interested in. Then we have your behavioral, situational, technical questions. So these all might depend on the type of field you're in, right? So tech question might be for those in computer science, engineering, right? Coding, all that stuff. Behavioral, situational might be in those that are more with like customer servicing and maybe face-to-face transaction or whatnot, right? So even knowing these questions, how can I answer these? Do I have a story to tell that I can highlight my skills and who I am, right? Other common questions, right? And here's just 3 questions that I like to usually ask when I do mock interviews here with students. And here are the bullet points of things that you can consider how you can answer these questions, right? These can help you construct those organized stories, right? There is a method. Has anybody heard of the STAR method in the chat? If you have heard about it, just raise your hand or put yes. Right? That's another thing that we can touch upon, right? The STAR method it allows you to really think, okay, STAR method starts for situation or task, right? It's essentially asking what setting were you in when you want to answer these questions, right? What story do you want to draw from? What was the setting? What was the task? From there, right, you want to go into action. What did you do? What did you have to do, right, in order to create a result or take action, right? And then the result, right? What was the outcome? What was the result of that action that you took, right? So in what setting were you? What action did you take? And what came out of that, right? And that can help you construct a more concise experience storytelling that you can tell to anybody, right? You could tell it to somebody in an interview. You could tell it to your friends. So sometimes interviewing just goes beyond just interviewing. Maybe you could start becoming a better storyteller in class, to your peers, to your parents, sisters, whatever, right? So it's the art of storytelling, right? So there is sort of a formula for it. And you can create, I'm pretty sure everybody has various experiences as well, right? So maybe one experience, you're like, okay, that's one experience that I can use in using the STAR method, but I actually have another one. How can I tell this story in a concise manner that might tie into this particular job description, right? So that's essentially a constructive way to go about it. The day of the interview, right? Again, it's just asking, making sure, you arrive early, leave your cell phone in the car, bring extra resume copies. I'm not saying to, walk in and hand it into them. And just have it in case they ask, do you have a copy of your resume, right? That shows preparedness, if that's in person. For virtual ones, it's imperative that you check your technology. As you saw earlier, we had a little bit of a hiccup, right? So I was prepared, but it was just, I don't know what happened, right? But it's okay. It's unprofessional when you are, trying to log in and last minute, you're like, my audio doesn't work, right? You want to make sure that everything is functioning, right? Don't have, like, I know sometimes if you're doing it on a Mac, make sure that you turn off all those notifications. Sometimes I know students get like messages, they've linked it to their phone, right? Make sure that everything doesn't interfere with your call, right? You want to make sure that it's easy to hear. And as well, if you have a copy virtually, if you want to have it in a PDF or something you can send it to them through the chat box or whatever, right? So make sure that you just show that you are prepared for the call, right? Whether it be in person or through technology, right? During the interview, right, just make sure you take cues from the interviewer, right? Kind of let them take the lead, see how they're asking the questions, gauge their type of persona, right? If you have a sort of you want to have a professional conversation and see what is it that they're asking, right? And how you can answer these questions, right? Making eye contact is essential, right? I'm not saying to like stare at them where you creep them out, right? Right. But, I know sometimes I get that question, well, how much eye contact is too much, right? I'm not saying, when they're talking, make sure that you're making eye contact with them, right? If you're talking, it's okay to maybe look away, a couple seconds or not, but you don't want to be staring at the wall or looking up, right? You want to make sure that you are still conveying that information to them and that they're getting it and being receptive to it, right? But it's very important that when they're talking, you keep that eye contact, right? And again, like a lot of it is just making sure that you express that confidence in yourself. I know sometimes it's like, well, I'm not too sure. I'm like, no, just be confident, sell yourself. You're your own marketing team, right? You're your own person you're your own, what do they call it? Oh my God, I'm thinking out right now.
You're your own brand, yeah.
Yeah. So, you're the one, you know yourself better than the person in front of you, right? So you have the power in your hands to make sure that you stand out, right? And a lot of it does take practice, right? And that's what this was about, right? Knowing how you can practice through, AI tools, machine learning, but at the same time practicing with one of us at the Career Center. And just to kind of speed up things, when you close the interview, make sure you ask questions, right? And that goes again, it ties back into the knowledge you get when you prepare, right? And things that you might have curiosity about, right? Whether it be from the company, the position itself, or maybe, you could ask if what type of opportunities exist in the future for upward mobility, right? It just depends, right? And then one of the biggest things that you do want to do is make sure you thank them after the interview, right? You don't want to just, have the interview and not say anything after, right? So maybe within 48 hours, you send a thank you email, thanking them for their time. This is not the time for you to start sending your resume again and telling them that you're right. You already had that opportunity, right? This is just a thank you. It's just cordial, and it makes you look professional in that sense, right?
Mm-hmm.
So keep that in mind. And then again, back to practicing, there is a mock interview night happening on February 15 that I'll be hosting through our platform BFairs. And so it'll be an alumni mixer. So you can practice here with different people from different fields and it's kind of like a speed dating type of thing where you get asked questions to see how you go, you get that feedback, maybe connect with those in the field that can give you better insight, right? So practice, right? Schedule an interview, schedule a mock interview at the Career Center. That could be one step. Use Big Interview, use VMock, sign up for the event on February 15th, right? And then if you want to follow us on our platforms, on our social medias, this will allow you to know what's going on. February is jam-packed with events. So just keep up with us, right? Through our socials, our entries are really great in making marketing, visuals, any of that stuff, right? And yeah, so we have drop-ins every day from 1 p.m. to 3:30 for resume general questions, right? 15-minute drop-ins. We're open from 8:30 to 5 p.m. every day. But if you need like an extended 30 minutes for any other questions, set up an appointment to Connect SC. But yeah, that's pretty much it. Again, sorry for the kind of the hiccup that we had earlier. Is there anything else, or I'll open it up for questions for Ryan or myself, or Ryan, if you want to say anything still.
No, think I'm happy to. Thanks again for having me, and I'm happy to answer any questions that may still be out there.
Awesome. Yeah. Yeah, feel free to just unmute yourself if you want to ask a question. I know there was a couple questions in here. If it wasn't answered, right, we can answer it. Yes, Ace, you can go
Yeah.
ahead.
Question for you. Like, is there on VMOC, is there any guidance on how to write cover letters as far as like, or do you have any recommendations on how to approach a cover letter or to apply?
Was that for me or for Ryan or for both?
Both.
Yeah, I mean, I think for VMOC, I'm not sure about the cover letter. I know that it's resume emphasized, and with the new mock interview one, right? But in terms of a cover letter, we can help you with that at like a drop-in here that we have. Are you on campus or are you online by any chance?
I'm online, but I'm in Los Angeles, so I can drop in.
Okay, cool. Yeah. At the same time, yeah, so if you want to drop in, we can do that. We do on our Career Center website, we do have a whole section dedicated to resume and cover letters. So like resources that you can use. We have a digital booklet that highlights like how to structure a cover letter, what type of content that can go in there, right? I don't know if you've seen our Career Center and gone through that resource section. If not, I believe yes, definitely put it on the chat box. But yeah, any feedback on that, Ryan, in terms of cover letters, how important those are as well?
Yeah, they're definitely important. I've seen them used a lot less, quite frankly. Just post-COVID world, right? ATSs aren't necessarily grabbing them. You can still attach. You can attach them to your hire review profiles, things like that, if companies want to. So it's a good professional step to take. Out of general interest, I just went on to Chat GPT and I just typed cover letter in, and it gave me a super high level rubric of one, but definitely a rubric of like a decent format. But just like anything on there, you want to make it your own. So you could try doing that for some inspiration as well. But um, the one thing I would say about cover letters too, it depends on what you're applying to, right? Like I found specificity, at least for me when I was applying to jobs, I found it was helpful to have industry specific ones, right? So when I was switching from the financial world, it was tech, then went to finance, then went back to tech. My cover letters were different, right? There's a different culture, there's a different vibe. This was also New York City when I was living there, so there's a much different vibe in finance in New York City. So it was just, it was helpful to have some of those nuances and differences, and I did find some of that just by searching online. So there's a lot of different resources that are readily available that you can find. I would just say lean on those, but make it your own. The only thing I would add to it is it's a great opportunity to yes, you can summarize yourself and your candidacy, but it's another good opportunity to show like, hey, I've got this skill or these skills, and this is why it fits, and based on what you've seen on the website, right? I wouldn't maybe necessarily like based on what you've listed on your website, I think I fit. But you could say that something like that in a much more eloquent way, right? But that's what I'd say about cover letters.
Yeah, so yeah, just make sure that you don't submit like a general one, because if they do read it, they can tell if it's just a general application, right? So you really want to make sure. I had like 50 when I was applying to jobs at one point. So I know that sometimes can be kind of frustrating, but as long as you have sort of a template, and when you're targeting certain jobs, it makes it easier for you to just change the language a little bit.
Yeah.
But it is important to tailor it.
Oh yes, I would say same thing with the resume, right? Like you've got your resume, tailor a line or two here, move some things around based on the job, right? But so you don't need to break, spend a ton of time tinkering and making every single resume and having it. Frankly, I think I saw something like this in the chat, having it graded, things like that. I think put together a good solid resume, and then based on the job, type of job, industry that you're applying to, I don't think you're going to have to change a lot more than some keywords, some bullets in the resume, because quite frankly, ATS systems and CRMs, what they're doing is they're just keyword searching, right? So again, this is more about when you get the interview, you want to do a great job representing yourself, because I've seen these sitting in the recruiting seat. If I search for software engineer in my CRM that's connected to all the applications that I get in my applicant tracking system, I may have, software engineer plus XYZ keyword, I may have 13,000 people that pop up. So again, I would suggest, like, yes, you want to have specific resumes applying for specific jobs, but especially depending on if you're applying to some larger companies, things like that, like, don't go crazy. Don't lose sleep over how much you're editing your resume, making it perfect. Focus on how you're going to be able to represent yourself when you get the interview. Because again, that's what a lot of companies are using these days, are just, with ATSs and CRMs, is these keyword searches, things like that, when they're looking for candidates, if they're not reaching out to you directly on a LinkedIn, something like that. So just some insights there that I think are helpful. And I would say the same thing for cover letters as well.
Yeah, thank you. So now, question.
Hi, yeah, thank you so much to both of you for taking the time out today and giving us all this information. I had two questions. One is, so with cover letters, do they also go through AIs, and should those also be very heavily like filled with keywords, and how important is that?
Yeah, I think, oh, Brian, yeah, kind of.
The resumes, it's a good question. I've been at HireVue, it'll be 5 years in the beginning of April. I am going to be totally frank here. I have had probably less than a dozen conversations that have included the word or the phrase cover letter, right? Like, the resume is the focus. These companies, these ATSs, they're using AI to scan, look at keywords, things like that. It's on the resume. And again, it's all about the skills. The skills is what employers are looking for. So I think including a cover letter and communicating skills that you may have is a bonus, right? A cover letter, I would say, is a human-facing document, if you will. A resume is, of course, as well, but that's something that could go through the rigor depending on the company and what technologies they have. Again, because this is a little bit out of HireVue's realm, but what technologies they have, and so many of the processes I've seen, that's going to, the AI is going to hit the resume more than it will the cover letter. So yeah, cover letter, human facing, resume, both, if you will, tech and human facing, but just make sure it's a good representation of the skills and stuff that you have.
Awesome. Thank you, Sonal.
Thank you. Sorry, I just have another very quick question. These resources that you've listed, are they available to alumni as well?
For alumni, so after you graduate, BMOC isn't accessible. So that's where you would maybe want to go into like that ChatGPT area. Big Interview, I'm not quite sure if it's still available. I'll give you an answer once I ask about Big Interview. But I know VMOC becomes unavailable for alumni, so I know that kind of sucks. But yeah, so I mean, there's still other ways to practice. I think we can. When did you graduate?
I'm about to graduate at the end of the semester.
Okay. So Big Interview is available to alumni. And even after you graduate, so you will have 3 years of services with us. So if within those 3 years you still want to set up an appointment to have a mock interview, whatnot, you can still do that.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
And then Candice, one last question. Feel free to
Great,
ask.
thank you. Yeah, thanks so much, both of you. I know earlier, Ryan, you were speaking about skills being more important and what employers are looking for. So my question was, how would you convey skills over experience in your resume? Because just getting to the interview, I feel like it would be easier to talk about and highlight your skills, but how would you emphasize your skills more so, or integrate them into your experience so that employers
You're saying
get to the stage of getting employers?
Yeah, so you're saying within the resume, Candice?
Yes.
talk about the role that you played in something, right? You know, I think that's the easiest one to get to. I think we're in an interesting space right now, kind of where. So when we went to HR Tech back in October, right, and that's everybody under the sun globally is there at HR Tech every single year, and there are heads of talent acquisition, CHROs from Fortune, you know, the companies that every single person knows in the world walking around learning, and all of them overwhelmingly were talking about looking at skills, going to skills and potential, and so this is going to be a longer answer than you're looking for, but what like HireVue is doing, for example, with our competency-based questions is like, we want you to be able, competencies are focused on like, you know, how are you working with information, teams, people, communication, warehousing jobs are looking at things like safety and compliance, things like that. So in the responses, but the questions are still focused on like, hey, you know, tell us about a time. It's actually kind of using the STAR method, right? Like, tell us about a time. What was the situation, the actions, and the outcome? So if you can get to a little bit more of verbiage around situations, actions, and outcome in a bullet point, which is easier said than done, right? It might take a little bit getting used to. That might be a way to highlight some skills versus experience. Unfortunately, with a lot of these CRMs, things like that, they are selling the services of like, hey, we're identifying skills and potential, but it's still totally dependent on what someone puts into a keyword search, right? So it's not a perfect science yet, by any means. So I think if you can fit in some buzzwords around skills, if you can fit in like, I don't know, language skills, coding skills, you know, things like that, leadership, I don't, you know, different pieces. If there's different skill keywords that you can fit in, try to do that. Don't go too crazy. I think it's way more important to focus on the skills right now in today's job environment in the interview itself, because again, the ATS, the CRMs, things like that, they're just scanning keywords. So it may not be that representative, right, necessarily. And so you can focus more on skills in the interview, but you could, like I said, it's not a perfect answer by any means, but you could try to just include a little bit more of those skills focused keywords versus like I did a project to do XYZ. It's like I was a lead on a project for XYZ, tasked with this communication, whatever, something like that. I hope that helps, Candace. It's not an ideal answer, but that's because companies are still trying to figure it out as we speak.
Yeah. Very helpful. Thank you so much, Ryan.
Cool.
Awesome. So great questions. Thank you for everybody that stuck through it. I think this is the most participants I've had after a presentation.
I do have to, guys. Apologies. Thank you.
Thank you, Ryan. So yeah, so thank you again. I will provide the slide deck and the presentation recording. Hopefully, I know it cut off, so I'll provide that. But thank you again, and I hope to see you in the future for more of these if you found them instrumental. Okay. Thank you.